Hello, everybody, and welcome to From the Game Throne. Over the years of my life as a gamer, I have been involved in gaming in more ways than just playing them, and one of the biggest parts of my life was working for the UK company formerly known as Electronics Boutique, and after a series of mergers, acquisitions, and business failures, merged with GameStation and subsequently dropped all other brands, leaving us with the familiar purple logo we still have on the high streets today, Game. Many children and families and gamers alike will often have a fond nostalgia of Electronics Boutique, GameStation, or Game, and remember just how joyous the occasion was when you would be able to go into store and browse through the games and barter in your own head over just what game you were going to spend your hard saved pocket money on. However, over the years, that nostalgia has come to be but a memory, and the game brand not only seems to be getting backlash from the public, but in 2012 the company went into administration, closing just short of 300 stores and costing the jobs of thousands of staff. I worked there during this time, and it was a very dark era indeed, waiting for the phone to ring just to get the call telling you that your job was gone and your store was closed. Luckily, I survived that culling, but that's just one part of a much larger story. So, what went wrong? Is Game doing well today? Should you shop there or should you avoid it like the plague? Well, let's discuss just that. Game today is doing surprisingly well. Its net profit in 2017 was just over 10 million. Yet, no matter who you talk to these days, the story seems to be the same. I hate going into Game. I'll never shop there again. There are so many staff who leave the business all saying the same thing. I'll miss the team, but not the place. It seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? Before we get going, I want to say that this is in no way a bashing of the company or the people that run it and work there. I wish Game and its staff all the best, and I hope that the last 10 years of its trading have been a fantastic lesson and will allow it to continue to grow and change. I should also be clear that I no longer work for Game, and all opinions herein are my own. So, in no particular order and without further ado, here's what I feel that Game did wrong. It wasn't about gaming. Okay, this might seem pretty obvious. You walk into a game store and you expect everything from start to finish to be about how awesome gaming is. Gaming is a culture, and for some people, a way of life. YouTube careers are being born from it. It's become mainstream. Instead of just sitting in a dark room playing Dungeons and Dragons, we're able to go to massive events where thousands of like minded fellow gamers are willing and waiting to play. Game didn't see this, or at least not at first. For years, I suggested that we have arcade machines in the store that people can play on. I suggested that we do tournaments and host events, rent out cinemas and have gaming events in them, have gaming cafes, get on YouTube and do reviews, and bring together a community of gamers. And Game just didn't listen. Instead, they would come up with convoluted special offers that were confusing and yet another thing to push on our customers. Like the Summer of Gaming campaign, where you could buy a game and return it and pick another game for just £1. But it was such a small selection of cheap games that no one wanted, and due to the cheap price point, you could just buy them and keep them. Nowadays, they have something called Belong, which is a great step in the right direction, where they are setting up venues with gaming rigs so people can play together. This should have been done a long time ago. And in fact, there were plans to do it until when they revamped the reward card system. One of the ideas that never came to fruition was money can't buy rewards, where you would go to special events, meet developers, and get signed rewards for your favorite dev teams and voice actors. And this was the direction that Game needed to move to before 2012, when it closed 277 stores. It's great to see that they're doing this now, and I really hope that it pays off. Management. This is one of the biggest issues for me. The company operated a very much micromanaged environment. Everything had a checklist, and store managers were pretty much unable to manage their own stores due to regional level interventions. We had strict budgets on hours that got smaller and smaller in each year in order to save costs, and the problem was that the company was giving staff more and more to do in a day, especially when trading mobile phones became part of the day. A single trade in on a phone, if it all went smoothly, could take 20 minutes. We would easily trade in 10 phones in a day, which would mean that you would lose a staff member for just over 3 hours. This didn't include time for deliveries, lunch cover, and still serving other customers, cleaning and merchandising. Yet they expected it all to be done perfectly and on time, without giving us hours to cover the extra workload. If you walked into CEX, their merchandising is very minimal, yet the queue is always huge and they have a shed load of staff on. We would effect be doing the same job as CEX, but with only 3 staff. One of which would be on lunch, the other trading in a phone or a console, leaving only one person to serve the customers and clean the store, put the new posters up, do the delivery or send back recall products, count the phones, count the stock. The management just saw hours spent as a drain on the business when they should have seen them as an investment. Back when I first started, Sunday was a quiet day. The business directive was literally no tasks on a Sunday. But as many stores from the 2007 to 2008 era will know, Sunday was catch-up day. The shop was trashed from the rest of the week, and Sunday the customers finally backed off enough for us to prepare the store for the week ahead. In short, we had to do tasks on a Sunday. God forbid, and this happened plenty, that a regional visit happened and you were out the back putting away the 2,000 games that were traded in the day before. You could quite literally face a disciplinary action for it. These days, Sunday is just as busy at times, so that's changed a little. But as I've tried explaining to many workers in my new job, when you're working for Game, there was no time to rest. If the customers died down a little, you had to keep that gas burning and catch up with the jobs that you haven't had time to do. All they had to do was give us an extra hour here or there for our rotas, and so much more could have been done. But instead this was left up to people who weren't actually working in the store. The upper management didn't listen to the task force. I've always said this, if the business was run by the people running the business, it would run well. Investment in staff. Oh boy, this is one of the hardest things I've faced throughout my career at Game. When you hire the kind of staff that places like Game attract, they are invested from day one. They are gamers and they have a passion for what they are about to embark upon, selling games to the public. You pretty much by default get a bunch of people who will work hard and help out as much as they can. When you say jump, they say how high. I've met some of the greatest friends of my life working for Game, and I've still got contact with most of them despite the fact I haven't worked there for years. They're such a fantastic bunch of people and that we're basically a little family. If one of us fell, the rest picked up the slack. It was such a wonderful and fantastic environment to work in. But that's where that ends. You see, I wanted to progress in that company, and my manager, when I started, could see that and very quickly helped me to get all the way up from a Christmas temp to deputy manager, which was awesome, and I can't thank him enough for it. But that's where the help stops. If you wanted to get to manager, you basically had to be a company yes man, which is something I absolutely refuse to do. I always worked very hard, and I never asked anything of my team that I wouldn't do myself. But I wouldn't stick my nose up the arse of upper management, and they didn't like that. They wanted me to say, yes, sir, of course, sir, but my own self-respect is more important to me. But you could see this across the board in every store. You could see hard-working staff that have been there for years, that should be on a much higher wage and in a better position, but because they have integrity, they would often get left behind, whilst somebody who's a bit more friendly with the higher-ups would get those opportunities. It's not to say that I didn't get chances, but when the time finally came for me to get my own store, I ran a nearby shop through a very successful Christmas. And after that, I was asked to do 2 weeks in what they called a flagship store, which I did, under the guise that it was part of my development to see if I was good enough to have my own store permanently. Little did I know they were just moving me out of the way so that someone the regional manager knew could move into my store. However, his move was delayed and they asked me to cover until he turned up. Of course I said no. I went back to my original store as deputy manager, where the exact same thing happened again, twice. They kept hiring new managers for my store and not giving me a look in. Most of those managers ended up being either told to leave the business or were fired. They weren't looking at the people who were willing to put the effort into the business and instead trying to manage it in their way, again, instead of the way that the people who are running the business already know how to do. Getting back to the point though, Game abused its staff. It knew they would invest their personal time into making sure the store was up to standard, and because I said it's hiring pre-invested staff, then giving them a nice family to work with, we all did it. I've done 26-hour shifts for Game. I've worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m, only to come back in at 10 p.m. and work through midnight until 4 a.m, then to come back in the next day at 8 a.m. and work until 7 p.m. Not only is that kind of shift illegal, but often we wouldn't always get paid for the hours that we did. There would be the odd reward here or there, but let's face it, when our staff are working midnight launches between 2 day shifts and are expected to operate at 100% performance, it's just unfair. Every single day, our team would be working past the end of their shift to get the store ready for the next day, and often not getting paid for it, or at least they wouldn't have if I wasn't so excellently trained on how to do the rotas. It really needed to say thank you to its staff and push that idea into them that yes, you're investing your time in us, but we promise that we are investing our time in you as well. And that just did not exist. It might exist now. Again, the business has changed. But you really need to give back to your staff. When they work through the night for you, you need to give back to them. It lost its roots. I need to paint a small picture here. Game acquired GameStation sometime in 2007, although there were business links before that day. How many of you 30-something-year-olds remember GameStation being the cheaper of the two? Well, that's exactly it. Once the acquisition happened, that stopped. GameStation became an exact clone of Game, just with a different paint job. And instead of investing in the customer base that GameStation had, which, let's face it, was usually the real hardcore type, it alienated that market almost overnight. It made the prices at GameStation match the ones in Game exactly. It had the same deals and almost overnight doubled the amount of stores, but lost nearly half of its customer base. What this meant is it was now running two businesses at double the cost, but with less customers. If it was insisting on changing GameStation's operating mechanics, which it did, Game, its HEOs and CEOs and chairman needed to make the decision to close the stores in towns where they already had 2 stores and move staff from the closed store to the still open store much earlier on in that business decision. I know they were trying to preserve jobs, and I understand the difficulty involved in making such decisions, but when you cannot afford to run 2 businesses, imprinting everything twice with a different lick of paint is even more costly. I do believe if they'd made this choice and shut the duplicate stores earlier, the business would never have entered administration, rent would have been halved, the lack of 2 stores would have meant the store that was still open was busier, and the staff from the closed store could have worked in the new one. At the very least, it would have bought some time. It's baloney deals. A small thing, I know, and like many things on this list, it exists in most private sector companies, but the in-store offers were bogus. The pre-owned games would constantly go from 3 for 2 to buy one get one free to buy one get one half price, back to 3 for 2 to buy one get one free. It's exactly the same deal profit-wise for the company. It's the same margin. However, customers would never have been any wiser to this. It's also a good time to mention its trading prices. They were never the best, but I don't think that they needed to be. Then they started to price match CEX, and this, in my opinion, was yet another mistake that the company made. They decided to believe this fallacy of something called blended margin. So, in effect, we would trade a game in at £1 above CEX's price, only if the customer asked us to. The idea would be that a game might trade in at Store A for £10 when price matched, but Store B is still trading in copies of that game for £5. So overall, we'll still make a profit even if the game's selling price point is only £8. But ultimately speaking, a loss is a loss, and people very quickly learned how to manipulate this trading system. I believe price match is gone now. You simply can't run a business trading in products for more than they sell for. That's just not how profit and loss works. The trading offers that did work were things like double trading days or special trading on specific products or against a specific new release. That sort of stuff, you needed more of it. But you didn't need to sacrifice the amount of profit we were making on a game just to price match another company. Another thing that they got wrong was not price matching their own website. Customers could quite literally buy directly from the same company online for cheaper than they could in store. And that's just plain bad customer service. They did eventually introduce something called Endless Aisle, which allowed us to order from the website for the customer and take the payment in store, which was great. But the product still got delivered rather than coming from our stock, which is a minor thing, but it's still a step away from the customer service you would expect from a key high street retailer. Further, if you're buying online from the same company, you miss the chance to sell the add-ons that the business wanted us to sell. So if the customer could buy the game for £5 less online, but we could make that profit back by saying, well, the season pass is a tenner, you're missing that chance to do so. Purchasing. Quite a short one here, but before the days of the company going into administration, they would often guess at how much stock they needed of specific titles, usually based on the previous year's figures of the same title, but then order an additional one for each pre-order that we took. What this did was ensure that the customer would always get their pre-order and we'd still have spare stock left over for general sales. It's a great idea in principle, except for the volumes that they ordered was way out of whack. When I first started working for the company, my store turned over 5 million in a year. By the end of my tenure, due to the decline in the market, that was down to 2.5 million. But they were still ordering way above and beyond what they actually needed. And often this was because of suppliers having certain deals, such as if you buy 10 copies, it'll cost you £44 each. You buy 100 copies, you get it for £43 each, and so on. However, an unnecessary spend is an unnecessary spend, and so much of our stock would be recalled or returned, costing money in deliveries, because we had to package it up and ship it off, or sold online at a lower price, again causing loss. So we've paid for the delivery to get it to the store, bought the game, paid for the delivery to get it back to the warehouse, sold it online at a lower price, and then paid for the delivery to get it to the customer, because delivery was free. All that churn just drained the profit off each title. After administration, it almost literally went to a 1-to-1 ratio on pre-orders, which was much better. They still ordered a couple of extra copies just in case, but this meant that the customer who came in and pre-ordered with this felt like it was actually worth pre-ordering, instead of just a gimmick from Game to take the customer's money. It really rewarded those that stuck with Game through the tough times, whilst managing to keep the cost low because we weren't ordering surplus games. And last, but by no means least, and if you're still listening at this point, thank you very much. But it wasn't about the customers. Let me just say that one more time. It wasn't about the customers. One of the biggest things that this company doesn't do well in my eyes is treat its customers accordingly. I often prided myself on how when customers walked into our store, all of our team would be smiling, laughing and joking, and very often you could see that reflected in the customers' eyes. Especially the regulars would join in our joking and laugh and have fun with us, and we'd be on first name basis. We would make the customers feel like part of our team. However, whilst I understand that Game is a business, the company, not the staff that work there, the company really did see the customers as walking wallets and tasked the staff with the job of extracting every single penny that we could. Daily, staff would be tasked with selling certain products, insurance for consoles, discs and downloadable add-ons, disc cleaning services, mobile phones and the insurance for those too. And we would quite literally have a list of things we needed to ask the customer that sometimes would genuinely be so intense that customers would walk back out the door without finishing the purchase because my staff were forced to ask them 6 or 7 questions when all the customer wanted was a £10 Xbox Live top-up. Picture the scenario: you've come in for a simple purchase like a second-hand game for £5. A typical list of questions that we would have to ask the customer would be as follows. Do you have any games you want to trade in against it? Do you know that we price match on our trade-ins? What games have you got at home? I can check the trading price for you now. Have you got a reward card? Have you downloaded our reward card app? This game has downloadable content. Do you want the downloadable content for $12.99? Do you want to insure that £5 disc for just £1 and then if it gets scratched we'll replace it for you? What mobile phone do you have? Do you know we buy mobile phones for cash? I can check how much your phone is worth now for you. Don't forget to look at our phones in the cabinet. Also, I've written my name on your receipt. If you could fill in the satisfaction survey, you might win £200. And that's just buying a £5 game. It didn't matter if it was a £5 game or an £85 game. We still had to go through that list. Never mind if the customer bought a phone or a console, or if they wanted to buy it on finance. It was and is daunting when someone behind a till asks you 1,000 questions, especially if you're just in there fetching a game that your grandkid or your son or daughter has written down on a piece of paper for you to just go in and get, and they've given you the money. This would quite often be where I tailor the experience, much to the displeasure of upper management. I would ask questions. After all, we need to make money, and our services, or some of our services, were genuinely awesome. Disc Care, for example, was fantastic back when Xbox 360s were scratching discs like there's no tomorrow. but I wouldn't want to give the customer the full rundown of every single question if it wasn't relevant to him. If you want a business to thrive, your number one priority is to make sure that your customers are happy, not alienate them or ignore their desires. Yes, greet the customers when they come in the door, but no, don't barrage them with questions. Greet them like a friend. Yes, offer your customers the very best of your services, but only offer the relevant products. Don't force 20 questions down their throat. Yes, ensure that you've explained that you have insurance policies available. After all, I honestly couldn't count how many Xbox 360s I've had that died on me just after the 1 year warranty, and that I've had that many free pad replacements with my Game Care insurance that it was more than worth it. However, don't force the customer into thinking that they have to buy the insurance because they are stupid not to. In summary, Game went downhill massively in my opinion over the years. I really hope that it's learning its lessons and will start to look after its customers from the ground up. I genuinely wish this company all the best, but in the declining market they are facing an uphill struggle. It's a great time to be a gamer, but with Steam, the Xbox Live Marketplace, the PS Store, and websites like G2A.com and Amazon being so cheap and so easy to buy from, you can get same-day delivery on Amazon. Bricks and mortar stores are going to struggle, and they need to reassess what they are doing and how they are doing it, and make sure that the customers really are at the heart of what they do, not the money in the customer's wallet. That will come with good customer service. Game, now it's your chance to make this about the customers. Thank you all for listening. Smeep out.